And hello. Hi,
Hi,
Richard. Such
Katie.
a smooth transition. Welcome.
Thank you. Your enthusiasm is infectious. It's been great having you here for these 2 days.
You're so very lovely. Honestly, it's working with people like yourself, like Walter, everyone who's joined me for this 2-day conference as a speaker, as attendee, participants. I feel it sounds very cheesy, but I love the community we're building and seeing the comments. It makes me feel alive. And, I'm streaming from Bratislava, so where the headquarters of Y Summits is located. It's
Mhm.
pitch dark outside. It's almost 6 p.m. The CEO of company went to grab me a dinner, and we're here streaming, and I'm so excited. So yeah, without
Nice.
further ado, honestly, I'm just going to say that Richard Sonnenblick is here with us. As you can tell, everyone, he is the CEO of Enrich, who is one of our wonderful sponsors for this event, which we're very, very hyped and excited and grateful for. And I'm gonna give you all 28 minutes that you deserve. You can actually carry on if you'd like the 2 extra ones. And I'm gonna give you the word. So please, everyone, enjoy. This is Richard from Enrich and his case study on next generation portfolio management. So thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, everyone, for your time today. So the topic of the talk is next generation portfolio management, and it's a little bit of a departure for us at Enrich as a software company. Uh, in the past, here's how we often describe our tools at these kinds of events. We talk about a set of essential activities, the first of those being business case development, building an integrated financial, commercial, and business development model, making sure it's transparent to instill confidence. Then the executives can begin to explore the portfolio, starting at the top, diving down into assets, franchises, compound indication pairs, but that's not where decisions are made. Decisions are made in terms of scenario planning, optimization, prioritization. A lot of the methods we've heard about from some of the other speakers in the last day and a half. And then finally, those decisions are communicated up and down the organization, and they're monitored over time so that as clinical readouts occur, changes in competitive landscape occur, you can reassess the wisdom of those decisions. So this is good as far as it goes, but it's rather high level. It's very feature based, which as a software company, that would make sense. But it's disconnected from the use cases or the user stories, the things that you're experiencing and your executive teams are experiencing every day. And so we wanted to do something a little different today and discuss a more nuanced approach to portfolio management. So this is what we're calling next generation portfolio management. So what is it? Is it applying the most sophisticated Monte Carlo simulation? No, not really. Is it about leaving Excel, PowerPoint, Microsoft Office behind and doing everything online? No. Is it a single source of truth that takes every thought ever had by any expert at your company and puts it at your fingertips? No, that's not it either. So this is a bit of a trick question because it might be some of these, it might be all of them, but that's not where we start, and it's not necessarily those. What we're calling next generation portfolio management is a 4-step process for improving your portfolio capabilities. So you begin with what portfolio management looks like for you today, where you are on the portfolio maturity curve. You look at your business situation in terms of competition, your technology platforms, your pipeline, and your market situation. You identify and adopt the portfolio capabilities, not just features, that align with your needs. And you always keep in mind the fact that it's a journey, not a destination. So over the last 20 years, we have observed client operations in companies all over the world. We've had detailed discussions with our clients, and we participated in portfolio reviews. So reviewing thousands of customer requirements, hundreds of customer use cases, and dozens of portfolio reviews, we'd like to share with you today some of our insights to make you both a better consumer of software tools, but also hopefully to build a better portfolio capability within your company, irrespective of the software you use. So we're going to start with that first step, what portfolio management looks like for you today. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It talks about the fact that you can't think about friendship and intimacy until you have a roof over your head, until you're food secure. And you can work up the hierarchy as the pieces are taken care of, and you feel secure in those areas of your life. So I'd like to introduce the Enrich hierarchy of portfolio needs. And I think this has the same wisdom associated with it. Starting with initiatives, the first question you ask in portfolio management, what are we working on? Do we have redundant initiatives? Do we have initiatives that we thought we canceled and are no longer funding, but they're still somehow alive? Now we can think about what are the resources associated with those initiatives? What do they cost? What are the staff, classes, or skill sets required? Bioreactors required, manufacturing, bench space, and so forth. Do we have enough to get it done? Now we can talk about the goals of those initiatives. Are we going to reach our goals given the initiatives we can afford? How do we define our goals? Do we have a set of goals that are concrete and measurable across our initiatives? This is kind of these three planks, these three tiers in the hierarchy are the meat and potatoes, or tofu and potatoes, of portfolio management. Now we're moving to some more esoteric needs if we can attain the base satisfactorily. Resilience is this next tier. Are our plans resilient to uncertainty? And what happens if something goes wrong? Do we have a plan B, a plan C? Are we managing uncertainty and therefore probably doing a good job of mitigating uncertainty in terms of clinical risk, commercial risk, regulatory risk? Or is it going to surprise us and catch us flat-footed? Are we partnering intelligently to share our risk, or are we shouldering all that risk ourselves all the way to the launch? And how about our balance in terms of risk of leads versus follow-ons? Are we too risk averse and we're sitting only on follow-on indications, or are we too novel and we're going to need to do something else to share our risk or have a portfolio approach? Beyond resilience, we can talk about feedback. This is where we get meta. Do we identify and learn and adapt from our mistakes? Are we calculating our errors on sales forecasts? Are we calculating our errors on probabilities of success? How frequently do we actually get to the market versus what our PTRS says? Do our milestones slip? And why? And how often? For which studies? For database lock? For which part of studies do they slip? Are we surprised by our competitors, or do we understand what they're doing and we're keeping our eyes on them? And now let's talk about bias. Do we see forecasting bias based on the teams who are providing revenue forecasts or clinical forecasts, based on the different platforms that we sell and develop, based on the indications that we go into and our targets? Is there a success that's correlated with certain project teams or even individuals? Is there forecast stability and that leads to success for a given asset? Or is forecast variability actually leading to success? And is partnering successful for us and why? So we can begin to use feedback loops here to improve our portfolio process at the very top of the pyramid. Let's talk about the next step now, which is there's no one-size-fits-all business model. Clients ask us, well, should we use cannibalization? It depends. Should we use detailed decision trees? It also depends. Do we need to correlate our leads and our follow-ons? It depends. We want to caution all of our clients and those in the industry for that they don't worship at the altar of false precision or overly precise analytics that go too far given what we actually know about a clinic, the regulatory posture, and the market. But all of the factors that you see here are going to make a difference in terms of whether you do have a detailed competitive landscape model or you do have a very detailed lead versus follow-on set of dependencies. So think about your business situation. To make it more detailed and more concrete, let's look at a vaccine versus an orphan drug. In terms of the financial model, Thinking about biomarkers, it's irrelevant for a vaccine. Some orphan diseases, small or rare oncology indications, biomarkers might be very important. In terms of a detailed demand assessment, does your financial model call for it if you're looking at a vaccine? Probably. Not so much for an orphan drug. A detailed COGS buildup, you're going to need that for your vaccines, which live and die on the margin, not so much for rare disease. Assessment of government and assistance and the regulatory posture, it's probably going to be important for different reasons, both for a vaccine and an orphan drug. And then finally, just skipping to cannibalization. If you're developing the next generation vaccine and you're selling the current generation, cannibalization is going to be super important. But for an orphan drug, probably not that much of an issue for you. So let's take a look within the Enrich Analytics platform at some of the varying levels of detail in project costing. We'll open a cost workbook, and you'll see a set of inputs on the left and a set of outputs on the right. We have a drop-down menu here, which lets you select different levels of detail so that you could look by phase and year, or you could even drop down to the study level and start entering detailed costing and timing and risk information on a study-by-study basis. Regardless of what level, it's important to be able to compare the cycle times, the probabilities of success you enter against a series of benchmarks. Those might be specific to an indication or a TA, a mechanism of action, or a molecule size. Let's move forward now to the next step in portfolio management, the identification and adoption of the portfolio capabilities that align with your needs. We have a lot of clients or prospects who come to us and say, well, we're coming to you because we've decided we want to do Monte Carlo, or we want to do real options, or we want to do decision trees. And we think that's putting the cart before the horse. It's more productive instead to think about what motivates the methods. There's probably an underlying portfolio process that then begats a series of use cases, where use cases are a sequence of actions that the business performs and produces a result of some value. And then those use cases will lead to a series of questions you're asking or exploring of your portfolio and your current situation. And then finally, you can link that to tools. So to make it more concrete, let's think about a process of project funding. That has a series of use cases associated with it. Right off the bat, I can think of 3: data vetting and QC/QA, asset valuation, and prioritization. Those use cases then have a series of questions. Is our data fresh and complete? Is our data passing a sanity check and comparing favorably or reasonably with benchmarks? Can we identify our top value projects, and can we identify those projects most aligned to strategy? So now, and only now, we can motivate a set of features that we need. Valuation and prioritization methodologies, dashboards for the same, interactive portfolio tables that allow us to explore different funding scenarios, and productivity rankings. So when we think about the use cases that motivate questions, the questions of R&D, the questions of portfolio management, some of those are on the screen here, and this is culled down from a list of hundreds we've heard over the years. But I'm sure a lot of these look familiar to you because you asked them within your organization. And I think it's really helpful to create a laundry list of the questions that are asked within your organization so that you can kind of back into the use cases that these questions belong to, and then categorize these questions across a series of a few categories of capabilities. Generally, we see about 6 categories. You could slice it differently in your organization. There's data vetting, there's budgeting and capacity management, there's asset optimization, strategic planning, portfolio resilience, which is where that simulation and uncertainty management comes in, and then portfolio communication. So rather than looking at that laundry list of questions, It's helpful to look at the categories that the questions are in. And then it's also helpful to align those questions to a set of features within the tools you use. Now, so these are all features across the rows that are supported by the Enrich Analytics platform and Enrich Viewport. And now we can say, well, if we're asking, what are we working on? Or we're asking, how do we bolster the portfolio to meet our goals? It's straightforward for us to say, well, we'll need to do some what if analysis at the project or portfolio levels. We'll need to explore layering and placeholder projects to look at potential acquisition or partnership. And we can then motivate the need for these different features. So I don't have time to go through all of these today, but why don't we drill down within the Enrich Analytics platform into one of these feature areas, specifically motivated by how have things changed since the last portfolio review and what needs our attention in the portfolio. So for this, we'll leave this project workbook and we'll move into a portfolio view. The portfolio view we're going to look at, we're going to set up a variance analysis where we're going to compare the 2021 review with a 2020 Q2 review. So about a year and a half in the past. So what we're going to do now is, rather than create a series of visualizations on the fly, we'll go to a set that we built beforehand, and we'll just open it in slideshow mode. So our first view shows us two phase promotions in this intervening year, Estger moving into phase 2, and Resdexel moving into phase 1. We can drill down into Resdexel and see not only is there a phase promotion, but we've also seen moving up about half a year of the phase 3 start date, and then a delay for NDA and launch of about a year. We can drill down and see this visually here. See, there's been no change in probabilities of success by phase. And if we're interested, we can see who actually made that change in the phase and phase information. It looks like it was me about a year ago. So we can move now to the next slide in this slideshow. And now we're looking at changes in in NPV and in probability of launch. We can see that the highest performing NPV asset also has the largest lollipop stick here. That means that it's got the largest change in NPV since that last portfolio review in 2020. We can drill down and ask the question, well, what did the revenue look like a year ago? And we can see that a year ago, we were looking at about $1 billion peak year sales. Now we're up to 1.4. Is this justified given what we know about this compound? We can drill down into the emerging standard of care, see how that's changed, and see how our product profile compares and how our standard of care is ranking vis-a-vis this emerging standard of care. Moving to the next slide, we can look at launch date variance across the portfolio. See that, sure, we have a slippage of about a year for Resdexel's launch, but we have a 3-year slippage for Madison. We could drill down and look at that as well now. Or we could stay at the top level, look at the portfolio as a whole in this waterfall view, and ask the question, what was the value a year ago for this portfolio versus today? We see we had in 2020 an $8.3 billion portfolio. Today, it's about $13 billion in value. Excuse me, there have been some changes in terms of a reduction in value for one project of just a scant 10 million. There's been an addition of one project here, adding 65 million to the ENPV. And then the rest of the change is explained by increases across the board in a series of projects that are pretty well proportioned across our therapeutic areas. Now we can look at this kind of a descriptive analysis and then move to a prescriptive analysis that shows us when are we unlocking value in the portfolio moving forward. And we can see that in terms of NPV, There'll be a transition to phase 3A for Virexigen that unlocks approximately 400 million in value next year. And in the following year, a transition for Zumanase that unlocks much more. There are some other projects that are unlocking value as well that we could drill down into, but they represent a much smaller increase in the overall value of the portfolio. Okay, let's move into this final step in next generation portfolio management. I'm sure you've heard this before, but it really is a journey, not a destination. I guess we'd start by saying, and you understand this from that last discussion, to know the difference between the features and the use cases you enable, and let the use cases, not the features, drive where you're headed with your portfolio management journey. Features are super quick to add, especially if you're using a platform like ours. It's never the rate limiting step. Use case capabilities are hard won. Putting in a feature without getting organizational buy-in and ensuring that the executive team has the appetite for using the results of that feature to make portfolio decisions, that's a surefire way to lose relevance within the organization and to lose momentum in your entire portfolio initiative. Because organizational change is so challenging, it can take years to arrive at a mature portfolio management process. And if you're doing it right, you're going to do it incrementally and you'll never really be done. There'll always be more sophistication that you can add as the organization becomes ready. And that sophistication can be process-based, it can be based in the analytics that you employ, or even the breadth and the depth of the data that you use. I'll say too that every piece of data that you request from your project teams, from your commercial teams, from your business development teams comes at a price. It's not only provided once for a forecast, but it's provided with some cadence and updated as needed. The value and integrity of that data needs to be vouched for by the project team. And every minute they spend building that, updating that, validating that information is time they can't spend on what they might consider their day job. So make sure there's an appetite and a real need for that data, not just that it would be a nice to have or you think the executives might be interested in using it in an analysis. So let's make this a little more concrete by looking at a few specific client journeys. This first journey is a 2-year journey where the client started with no specific business case template at all, basically a wild west of spreadsheets. They moved very quickly into Enrich Viewport for visualization, taking the results of each of those spreadsheets and aggregating it within our platform. And the following business cycle, they were able to consolidate not only the results, but a series of input templates within the Enrich Analytics platform so that it could be used as a single source of truth. The next business cycle, they began calculating business case financials within the Enrich Analytics platform so that they could then perform sensitivity analysis and scenario analysis directly in the tool online and save the results of that and share it with their colleagues. And then finally, in the next business cycle, at the end of 2 years, they were able to bring in some uncertain inputs, such as the probabilities of phase transitions and uncertainty in timing and revenue associated with each of their compound indication pairs. And here's a 3-year journey that involved a company who started with a standardized business case template in Excel. So in the very first business cycle, they were able to upload via Excel all of their business case data into EAP. And then in the next business cycle, they added nightly automated data transfers of their commercial and operations data so that EAP became a single source of truth that was always up to date with very little work on their part. And in the final business cycle, they were able to calculate not only the base case scenario for each asset, but buy up and buy down scenarios as well that could be pulled into the portfolio. One more journey that also took about 3 years was a company that started with no business case assessment at all, which just meant that the decisions were being delegated down into the organization. And program teams were deciding what molecules would move forward. And the company then moved, using the Enrich Analytics platform, to a state where hundreds of project owners could log into our tools and develop their business cases within the tool live. The next business cycle, they asked those same project owners or asset owners to create multiple product profiles and ascribe the probability of each profile occurring associated with the entire asset portfolio. And then the final business cycle, they were able to conduct their reviews live in the Enrich Analytics platform rather than dumping the data into hundreds or multiple hundreds of PowerPoint slides. So I'd like to drill down now into one of these use cases, specifically looking at buy-up, buy-down scenarios and portfolio level scenario planning. So for that, we're going to open a different portfolio view, this one with buy-up and buy-down scenarios for a couple of the assets. So first, we'll look at the table down below, and what we see here are two versions of Avniman, an accelerated development and a base case version, and two versions of Iaglogen, a buy-down version with a slower phase 3, and the base case version. And you can see in terms of these three investment plans that for the first one, we're choosing the accelerated development scenario of Avniman. For the next, we're choosing the base case for Iaglogen and Avniman. And for the final, we're choosing the base case for Iaglogen and the buy-up for Avniman. So as we look at these three investment plans in a series of charts, we can see that all three do a pretty good job of meeting our revenue goals over time, indicated by the blue wedge here in the background. But probably the base case here does the best job of meeting that revenue target over time. And all three do a pretty good job, with the exception of Accelerate Both and Speed Up Avniman in 2019, of meeting our budget requirements. So there's little to differentiate them here, but let's look in terms of an uncertainty analysis, where we're looking at the range of outcomes given the uncertainty in revenue and the uncertainty in probabilities of success for the assets and the specific versions of the assets in each of these investment plans. So now as we look at the range of NPVs in the top left corner here, we can see that the base case has a slightly higher chance of some of the higher value outcomes occurring. And it's even easier to see this when we move to a cumulative distribution. We can see that Speed Up Avniman is giving us, well, with 50% chance, about a $7 billion value, whereas the other two are giving us about a $9 billion value at least, with a chance of 55%. Similarly, we can look down at our cost scenarios, and we can see that across the three different investment plans, only Speed Up Avniman doesn't pose the risk of doubling our spending in the middle of the time horizon. These peaks here indicate that for the base case and Accelerate Both. So even though Speed Up Avniman doesn't provide the same amount of ENPV, it's also providing a lower risk of requiring excessive spending in the near term. All right. So we think next generation portfolio management is a pretty effective process or a series of steps for right-sizing your portfolio management initiatives to the specific of your organization. Now, we realize that Enrich, that the tools we provide are only as good as the processes into which they're embedded. So this talk has been a little bit of enlightened self-interest in that respect. There are links here for our website, our blog, where you'll find comments on our thoughts about portfolio management best practices, and our YouTube channel, where you can see a lot of videos showcasing our products. I hope we have the opportunity to talk shop with you soon, and thanks for your attention today.
Dear Richard, this was wonderful. Did you enjoy it?
It was a lot of fun presenting. Yes, thank you, Katie.
Thank you so much. Actually, there are no questions, so I feel like you were way too informative, so no one else actually came up with anything to ask you, which is pretty incredible. And
I
you
left
know,
them speechless,
you're
right?
the best at what you're doing right now, and you know, CEO of Enrich. So as I said, Richard Sonnenblick from Enrich, who is one of our sponsors. So I did want to say thank you again for making this conference happen, and it's such a pleasure. And it's a pleasure to have you here as one of our speakers. It's an honor. So thank you so very much. I'm very happy that you came and that you were able to enjoy it as well.
Thank you so much for all your efforts, Katie. Much appreciated.